Hello and welcome to day 2 of the PeopleSoft Innovation Summit. Thank you for joining us for Change the Communication Paradigm presented by Ernst from CY2. My name is Joseph Beringhouse. I'm the Senior Field Marketing Coordinator at Apcian. And I'd like to thank you for your participation in the PeopleSoft Innovation Summit. Just a few housekeeping notes. Everyone is on mute and will stay that way throughout the session. The session is being recorded and we'll post the recording to the registration landing page for free on-demand viewing within the next week. Also, the session today will be 60 minutes with Q&A at the end, so please feel free to ask any questions in the questions section of your control panel, which is usually found on the right hand of your screen. If you're missing it, look for a little orange arrow and you can click on that and ask any questions you have. With that, I'd like to turn things over to Ernst to begin today's presentation. Ernst?
Thank you, Joseph. Hello, and welcome to you all. Welcome to the conference. Lovely to see you all and very happy to be able to present today. Thanks for taking the time to listen to me. Thanks also to the guys at version 1 for doing a fabulous presentation on the, well, not the same subject, but let's say at least a subject which is really adjacent to what we're actually about to talk about. So hopefully you'll see some overlap and also some new innovative stuff that we've been actually working on in the same area of interest, so to say. My name is Ernst La Haye. I'm a consultant from CY2, and we are a company which actually runs campus solutions implementations in a large number of countries of the world, and also connected to Oracle Student Cloud. And I wanted to talk to you today about communication, and especially how we see the communication paradigm changing and what that actually means to us. For us, if we set the context, communication is key to anything that we do as a human being. We are interconnecting with one another, we're interconnecting with machines, we're interconnecting with applications, and communication in its essence is really, really valuable and really a necessary part, I would say, of the interaction between ourselves and the systems and ourselves and others. So communication in that sense is really something really important and also something which is constantly changing over time. When we look at PeopleSoft and we go back a number of years in time, this is what PeopleSoft actually had as communication mechanisms to actually communicate to its users. It used stuff like lettergen to actually create letters. It used a bit of email. It had reporting capabilities which were mainly focused on paper. And the general paradigm was you needed to go to the information, it didn't actually come to you. So when you were interested in particular information, you either had to actually go into the system and check it, or you need to actually open your email to check it. And if you want the report, it would actually be on paper mainly, so to say. Now, this of course is quote long ago. Over the last 10-15 years, there's been lots of changes in the communication capabilities of PeopleSoft Campus Solutions and other PeopleSoft applications. So when we look at PeopleSoft capabilities today, this is what actually now is available. We still have email, of course. We still do millions and millions of emails, more than, at least in my industry, education students actually like in general. We actually are able to send SMS messages. We're actually able to do alerts. We're doing push notifications. We're doing push notifications to users for different kinds of exercises and different kinds of transactions, informing them about approvals, informing them about particular tasks that students have to do when they're doing activity guides. They are actually being informed about processes, all those kinds of things. Nowadays, especially if you're, well, not especially, if you're using WhatsApp and you are actually using Twilio, then you can actually in 858 connect Twilio to PeopleSoft. Not to Campus Solutions out of the box yet, but at least to HR. For instance, there's a chatbot connection, of course, at tools level nowadays in 858 to the Oracle Digital Assistant. And when looking, I'm not so much going to talk about reporting today, but when you look at the whole communication paradigm, reporting, of course, nowadays is mainly focused on online use and far less on paper, so to say. The whole shift from paper towards first queries and BI Publisher, and then actually went on to become pivot grids, and now is actually, of course, moving to Kibana It means that we're actually more into using things on the fly when we are, where we are, to be able to get the information we need. And far less, I would say, especially at least in our industry, is letters as such being used. So we've shifted from paper very much from almost completely to digital communication. And with that digital communication, also a large variety of channels, more than just SMS or more than just email. We're now also actually utilizing other types of notification methodologies and mechanics to actually do our communication with. Now, if we look at that from a more general perspective, the paradigm is starting to shift in the sense that we're actually pushing out more to use than that we're actually asking users to come to the information. But the question that we have asked ourselves and that we see ourselves actually asking constantly over at least the last, let's say 2 to 3 years is actually we're pushing out information to users, but are those users actually where we are sending this information to? Many of you, probably all of you, have an email box. Mine actually says about 1,000 emails not answered yet. And that is because I am actually not so much focused on email nowadays anymore, because I'm actually in other types of platforms all day. And with me, most of my colleagues, and actually also with me, a lot of you in different other channels in the world, actually utilizing Slack, utilizing Teams, utilizing Google Hangouts, utilizing all kinds of platforms that are not actually, for instance, email. So the question is, we're pushing it out, but are people actually reading what we're sending? Now, that's the supply side, the property, the capacity, the capability side of things. PeopleSoft can do much more than it can or that it could a number of years ago. Now, when I look at the other angle and see what users actually want, at least as said in my industry, when we look at people, and just not students as such, it's also administrators, it's also instructors, advisors, etc. They like to use interactive tools. They like to use tools that actually give them the capability to interact, instead of just actually bringing them information and then having to actually go into another tool to then do something with the information they've just got, so to say. The other comment is the speed at which the new capacities are actually being offered, and this is, with all due respect to PeopleSoft, a PeopleSoft problem, I would say, more than a generic technology problem, is people in general are actually moving faster in their demand change than we are moving, or the PeopleSoft is moving in their capability change. So we're constantly lacking behind on where the people that we're trying to reach are actually at, so to say. And again, this is not just a shift from technology, it's also a shift. If you look at if you look at the graphics around younger generations of people, they're more and more utilizing their phone, they're more and more utilizing chatbots and other speech and text-driven APIs. They're not just actually there for getting a message from you that something actually is happening on campus, or that something actually has changed, or that something is new. They also actually want to interact with that directly if possible, please. So we have a challenge in the sense that we have systems that actually have particular capabilities. We have users who actually would like more than what the capabilities are. And what I'm trying to see today with you guys is, what can we actually do, or what are some ideas that we actually have on extending the capabilities of the tools that are available to us from a PeopleSoft point of view, at least, and then looking also at our solution to solving this problem as well. So when I look at ideas about extension, and some of these we've actually utilized ourselves, actually all of them, but also looking at capabilities that you may want to use, especially if you're not on 858 yet, for instance, you can do a number of things. So one of the things you can do is actually extend your notification framework if you're in Campus Solutions, that is, at least. The notification framework from Campus Solutions does have a lot of extension capabilities. You are able to relatively easily actually extend the model, create your own channel to actually push data to other places than data is now pushed to, because the notification framework, push messaging framework, is nice, but it actually only pushes out to mobile phones, for instance. As such, it doesn't push out to WhatsApp, for instance, or it doesn't push out to SMS unless you're actually using their implementation of how they feel that SMS should actually be sent. So you have capabilities within the notification framework, which is a really nice, lightweight, I would say, framework that you can easily extend, and there you can actually enter some extension points and actually use your own tools to actually push data out and utilize the rest of the framework that actually your functional users can then use to send out information to people in the system as such. Another one, and I've seen a fantastic presentation about the capabilities of this particular idea. So I would actually suggest that you go and look at the presentation that was just held by the guys from version 1. But you can create your own event publication and subscription methods within the push notification event. And one of the things that we have been using it for is to actually have a process scheduler listener on the page. So when you actually kick off a process that is not scheduled by the process scheduler as such, but is scheduled by a people code that does a scheduling of a particular process via a button on the screen, you can actually have that listener listening to the end of the process and actually waiting for the process to finish. As said, lots and lots of other ideas around publication and subscription of events just being mentioned. So I would absolutely urge you to look at that presentation if you're interested in push notifications and event publication and subscription. Now, with this particular event publication and subscription, you actually publish your events in some way, and you actually subscribe to them either via JavaScript, as Rob actually showed, or you can actually also subscribe to them via people code, so to say. Another one, actually, I like, to an extent at least, is the fact that we can now actually utilize, if you're on 858, and otherwise you can still do it, of course, if you're not on 858, but then you'd have to actually get your own REST servers in place and maybe copy some people code from 858 database that you may have somewhere floating around. You can implement the SMS and WhatsApp connection, even if you don't have the official links for that you have nowadays. I think both HR and in finance are already implemented. Campus Solutions doesn't really have them yet completely, so, or at least not that I could find them at least. So, but even with that, utilizing that functionality is not very hard, at least not if you want to use a Twilio connection. So what you need is actually to switch on some functionality in the notification framework so that you can actually utilize this. Your users can actually identify themselves and their text messaging number in their own preferences, and you can actually utilize, if you switched on this Twilio text post, you can actually utilize the Twilio connection then to send out information via Twilio to WhatsApp or to SMS. And should you be interested in, don't you actually, or do you not have an HR database at hand, but you just actually focused on for instance, Campus Solutions, this is the actual app class by Oracle that actually does this publishing to window at tools level at least. And in there, you can find the code that actually will be called when you try to publish something to window. And therefore, if you would actually cut and paste some of this code and actually utilize it in your own classes, you can then also trigger these SMS and WhatsApp messages via Twilio from other places than just in the publish to window, which is part of the notification framework from PeopleTools. So you can, of course, use it in the publish to window. If you have your own event and you actually create your own event and that event actually has been subscribed by users to actually be a SMS or a WhatsApp, it's absolutely possible. But if you want to go beyond that, you need to actually pick up this code in here and actually just create your own class and actually do some stuff with it. It's actually relatively simple, and then it works really well. Now, we're utilizing the push notification framework a lot, but we're utilizing it actually in a different way. If you actually go to the notification framework and you look at the events, these events are publication and subscription events that actually work on the basis of key value pairs. So they actually have a number of fields that are pushed out as part of the publish of a particular event towards this framework. And then on the subscription side, they actually listen to these particular events when they get published, and then they utilize the information that gets published in a message or in an event object to become your subscription information that you can do something with. Now, Oracle has delivered what they call mobile application framework adapters to that particular publication notification framework. And the interesting part is that in that adapter framework, you can actually put your own people code adapters into our push notification framework to do things with and to listen to the events that are published. So now you're listening to events without actually having any interaction with a specific user and without having the necessity of the user being subscribed to a particular message, or even you configuring push notifications to be, let's say, publicly available to users, because these events are actually pushed out anyway. They're actually going through these adapters anyway, and then they'll be either or not published to the user if the user is subscribed. Now, we're utilizing these MAF adapters to actually create event adapters that we can then utilize to communicate to users in different ways. And the only thing that you have to do for that is to extend the PTPN adapters package. Your new class needs to be in there in that particular hierarchy, otherwise it won't work, but you can just add new classes to that particular PTPN adapter package. That's also what Oracle actually describes that you should do. So in that sense, I think it wouldn't be a problem to do so, at least. I hope not, at least, but because we're doing it. And then with that, you can actually listen in to this particular MAF application adapter, and you can listen into the events coming by on notification. And when they do come by, you can, of course, then actually read out whatever is in that particular event and do something with the information in there. So really simple way to actually listen into all kinds of events actually floating by in the system. There is a standard 15 different categories of events defined. Some are for testing, some are absolutely in production mode. So one of them was actually, for instance, the whole approval workflow framework, the activity guide composer, process scheduler specifically for your notification window, and then some other parts and pieces that we, at least from a Campus Solutions point of view, use less, but are maybe interesting for other people in other people tools applications. And of course, you can create your own event, create a new event category here, add that into this particular type, put your own key value pairs into it, and then utilize the same adapter functionality to listen to your own event and do something with it afterwards. So really nice functionality actually to be able to use your events that are actually pushed out by Oracle, and then taking your own advantage of them to do something with them and to communicate to users with them. A number of options, as said, most of which we've utilized over the last years. And then at some point, I actually felt like, okay, does it suffice? Does it work? Are we actually reaching the people now where they are then? Well, not really, actually, in my view at least. So we're still communicating in a point-to-point manner. We're still actually utilizing mainly or almost completely PeopleSoft as the basis, which is great. If you're actually in PeopleSoft and there is a notification coming up for you, fantastic. But what if you're not in PeopleSoft? Then the notification never reaches you unless you actually open your email, which you're not opening, or unless you look at your phone. Now, well, I live in an area where there is little phone coverage, so I wouldn't even get the WhatsApp message, or I wouldn't even get the SMS message until hours later, most likely. So I still don't reach the people actually where they are most. And in that sense, people still need to move towards the data if they are towards the information. If they open PeopleSoft, there will be a nice bell icon with 20 items, but if they're not going into PeopleSoft all day and one of the icons in the bell is actually urgent, then we have a problem anyway. So in our view, the communication is actually still not really effective. So we actually came up with another idea to actually fix this problem. So we set our goal to say we want to reach people where they are by creating this communication hub that can connect anything to anything. We don't want to actually connect just PeopleSoft to a particular thing like WhatsApp. We don't want to connect PeopleSoft to, let's say, SMS, email, or whatever it is. We want to actually create a hub that is able to actually connect anything to anything. And with it, in our view, we're not actually inventing a new type of communication. We're not actually creating something new. We're just connecting the dots. We're actually making sure that we can actually reach people where they are, because we're offering them a variety of choice on where they want the information to go. And we can actually actively focus on getting that information to where they are. Now, let's see if we can actually make this work then, okay? So then I can actually show you how this would actually work in practice. So let me sign on to PeopleSoft here for a second. And let me log on as myself here. And if I'm here on my Campus Solutions Administrator page, I want to show you a few things here. So one of the things I want to show you, it's an example. It's a super simple example, but I actually do want to show it. It's an example of an approval workflow, right? Now I know that the forms functionality is maybe not the most used approval workflow in the world, but it utilizes exactly the same framework as all the other approval workflows do when it comes to notification. So I'm just going to say, I don't know, demo message for conference, whatever. And I'm going to save that. And once I've saved that, I'm going to actually submit that particular message. And now, as you saw at the top end of my screen, if all is well, there is a Slack message there that says there's now actually a message for me. Now, let me open my Slack, because actually we're a Slack company in that sense. And here we are in my CY2 Connect channel. And this is not me. This is another user that I'm actually utilizing to get the message from me here. And as you can see, there is actually an approval request that has just come in seconds ago that is now awaiting my approval. Now, if let me not sign out, let me sign out before we actually get weird stuff here. So if I want, I can just click the hyperlink, actually send myself to the system here. And if I do, here I am with my demo message for my conference. And if I then say, yeah, that's fine, I will approve this particular message, great idea, right? Then I can submit that. And there is a message, hey, that's interesting. Now actually my submit has already been approved. Interesting. So let's see where I am then. Hey, now I'm in a completely different Slack channel, and this is actually me. So I'm getting the response of the fact that there is now an approval that has been approved from me. And I can actually also check in the system if I want to, what the message is about, and the fact that I've actually been approved is great, of course. So I'm happy I can actually get myself moved on with whatever I'm doing. So we're utilizing the push notification framework to actually communicate straight to Slack and back. Now, let's say that's all great and fabulous, of course, but let me just actually go and do something else now. Now, how often do you run, for instance, I do sometimes at least, well, how often do you run a process like the DDD audit or the SIS audit or some other process where you're not entirely sure, at least, if it's going to take 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, or 15 minutes, depending on which database you're in and depending on what time of the day it is on. So what if I can just actually kick off this message and actually go and do something completely different? Yes, in either a different application or in completely log out of PeopleSoft and whatever. And still, when my message actually, when my process is finalized, I can still see it because my Slack, which is open all day, will actually receive the message to tell me that this particular process is finished. Wouldn't that be nice? So under while, or actually in PeopleSoft now anyway, let us actually do something else while we're waiting here for this particular process to finish. Oh, there it is already. So look, now we're actually back in Slack, of course, and we're seeing that this particular process is finished and is now available to be viewed by me. So I now have, ta-da, a particular process here about this audit that actually has just run. So if I have a process that actually is going to take a number of, I don't know, minutes, hours, I don't know how long, I can actually just go and do something completely different and never have to worry about the fact that this information will get to me. And again, of course, I know I can send an email when the process is finished and so on, but again, my email box is not being checked all day, and especially not every 5 minutes. But my Slack channel is actually checked every 5 minutes, and as you can see, with the notifications coming in, you already actually have your message even on your laptop as such. Now, let's do one more thing here, and actually, just to get the idea, Alain, if I can, that would be nice. Just move the browser here. That's it. So what if we could also do this on virtually every component in the whole system? For those of you who've actually been at Jim's session yesterday, you've also seen, of course, the fact that we can do event mapping on components. Now, I've put a bit of event mapping behind this particular component, which for people who use Campus Solutions is the maintain schedule of classes component, so that when I actually change one of the meetings of this particular class to be happening on a different time of the day, for instance, let's say 2 o'clock in the afternoon, that the people who are actually enrolled in this particular class directly get a message, and they actually can see that there is actually, oh, that's always interesting, of course. Never do things in demos, it always actually fails, of course. Let me just try that one more time. Should work fine, I would hope. I'll just use another one. In my beautiful demo database, this has now, of course, not worked very well. Right, so let me actually add a class here, and this 10 a.m. 10 was the comment. Right, click save here. And there we have a scheduling notification coming in for the people who are actually enrolled on that particular class. So whatever we do, whatever we actually want to do in the system, be it a process that we actually schedule and run, be it approval workflow that we want to actually tackle, be it a particular event on a particular page that we want to kick off at a particular time, we're able to. We actually just pick up we use the notification framework, and or we use our notification implementation of that notification framework to actually communicate to people where they are. Because this is Slack, and we're a Slack company, but you've also actually probably read by now that Teams is taking over the world. And Teams is now at, let's say I was at a partner conference a few weeks ago, I think they're at 150 million users actually now concurrently per day, which is going to grow even more as more and more universities are moving towards Teams to actually manage their classes and to manage a lot of what they're doing with their students. So the number of people using Teams is gigantic and is actually growing really fast. Now, our tool actually connects to whatever we want, so we can just as well connect to Teams for our students as that we can actually connect it to Slack, as I'm showing here. So the capabilities of utilizing the events that are already in the system predefined that we don't have to do anything about, but just actually listen to, and actually the capabilities of utilizing a bit of event mapping people code actually gives us the power to communicate to people where they are, when they are, so to say. And last but not least, I would like to say, if I just go back here for 1 second, right? So this is what we actually use. This is literally production data that we're actually talking about here, to the extent that there's actually, these are production errors that we're getting, to say. So anytime there is an error in a particular part of the system, we have a generic logging framework that we utilize and that we communicate to Slack, so that when there is a problem or a user actually does something which we find, at least in our code, is weird, we're getting a communication here to tell us that there is a problem. So all of that kind of information can be sent wherever you want. Really, really, really simple. So we're just actually utilizing this kind of stuff on a daily basis to be able to actually be far more on the ball, I would like to say, than we would be before. Because before we had the logging framework and it worked fantastic, but it worked when you were connected to Campus Solutions. You had to go to Campus Solutions once per hour or so to check if there was a problem, or you could let the logging framework actually send you an email once in a while. But this, of course, is on the fly. This is really like half a second after the error has happened, we already see it. So if you're in a maintenance team, or if you're actually on the functional support or technical support of a PeopleSoft database, as long as you utilize this, you're quicker to the ball than anybody else. Even before your users have actually put in a service desk ticket, you're able to already identify what's going on. And that may sound like something you don't want to do, but on the other hand, we see from a maintenance point of view, at least, that it actually is much quicker to manage things if you're able to start as quickly as possible after the error has actually happened, instead of that 3 weeks later somebody tells you, well, the last 3 weeks all kinds of things have been going wrong, and then you actually find yourself in a total mess. So having quick information to any error messaging happening in the system is absolutely crucial in our view. So how did we do all this, right? So we do all that with what we call CY2 Connect. So we've created a solution outside of Campus Solutions that we actually utilize to connect to Campus Solutions, but you could also connect it to HR, you can also connect it to Fin, you can also connect it to SAP, you can connect it to anything that actually is able to send out a REST web service. So we're connecting to all these different systems, and we're listening to all kinds of different things. We're listening to the notification framework by Campus Solutions. We're listening to the process scheduler. We're listening to custom business events. We're listening to approval workflow, notifications coming by, etc. And as long as the user is actually subscribed to these and actually has the app that actually that you can utilize for Slack, or the app that you can utilize for Teams, or that you can actually have as a WhatsApp message or a WeChat message or whatever, these people get the messages where they want to get them, so to say. So how does it work? So we have an event trigger which happens in a source application, like for instance Campus Solutions, and we send out through, in this particular case, for instance, the let's say the event mapping framework, or let's say the AWE notification framework. We send out a message request object with multiple parts and an array of operator IDs that should, in our view, get this particular message, because if 5 people are able to approve a particular workflow, you want all 5 people to actually be notified of the fact that there is something to approve, right? So we're sending out these 5 operator IDs with the message saying, hey, listen, there's something to approve. That goes to Connect. Connect actually connects based upon the fact that it sees which operators come in and where these operators want to get their information. It connects to the application or the API layers of the different target applications, and that actually delivers the messages at the target application. Right? So how do we manage this from a more people code level point of view? We actually have a package that actually has an asynchronous message in it, and that asynchronous message is actually sending the message that something needs to happen to a queue. That queue then actually sends it out to a web API, which actually is still in PeopleSoft, and actually calls then Connect. Connect actually receives the message, and then Connect actually sends out the message to the target application after figuring out which users have actually subscribed to which services on the other side and who should actually get messages where. Alternatively, if you want to, you can actually do synchronous messaging in PeopleSoft as well. If you have a particular message that is really business critical and you don't want to wait for it, or you don't want any queue to actually prevent this particular transaction to continue before the user has been informed about it, you can also actually use a synchronous message. And if you are not in PeopleSoft, but you're, let's say, in SAP, or you're in Salesforce, or you're in another application, and you still want to utilize Connect, you can. Because all your source application has to do is call the web API. The web API then actually sends information to Connect, does all the same things, and actually sends the target application the information. The only thing that Connect requires is a way of understanding which user should get which notification, and then Connect will figure out which particular target applications this particular user is subscribed to, right? So that all sounds fantastic, but how do I actually manage my preferences then for what I do? Now, you can actually set your preferences in PeopleSoft. As you may know, the preferences component in PeopleSoft is actually a flexible and extendable component where you can set your preferences and you can actually plug in custom pages for custom type of preferences where people can actually set their preferences. That's one way of managing it. There's also the ability, and of course, some of the target applications like Slack, like Teams, like Google, actually have their own abilities to set your preferences, because you can actually communicate to the app that actually is connected to your Slack or to your Teams, and through there actually update your preferences if you like. Both cases, the information about those preferences gets stored in Connect, and we actually know what you want to do as a user. Now, let's say that you're actually interested in using this for Slack, or you're interested in using this for Teams or something like that. Then how does it work in practice then? So what you actually do as an end user is you actually connect yourself, or in the case of Teams, for instance, your institution connects you as an end user to the app, so that you actually have the app already in your Teams folder, or that you have your app in your Slack folder, for instance. Especially, again, I'm actually an education guy, so if you're talking about students, you don't want them to actually connect themselves. You just want to say, okay, listen, you're going to get the app, and we're going to communicate to the app through to you, or at least we're going to give you the option to say yes or no, maybe, but we're connecting the app for you. Anyway, however you do, you actually connect to the app in the messaging application of choice. That actually sends you back, if you do it yourself at least, back to PeopleSoft. In PeopleSoft, you actually confirm your subscription. And once that subscription is confirmed in PeopleSoft, that subscription is sent back to C2 Connect. And then from that moment onwards, we can actually start to send messages. And let's say that you're actually connecting to PeopleSoft, then in this case, particular PeopleSoft can actually start to send messages to you. Right? And of course, if your institution, or if you're from the institution side, want to do this for 1,000 users, in the end, what you need to make sure is that your operator IDs where you want to send information to are linked to the unique IDs that these people actually have in the different target locations of choice. So that is in the case of Slack, Teams, Google, etc. And if you're actually talking about WhatsApp, or if you're talking about SMS or other types of tools, WeChat or so, then at least either I need a phone number for somebody, or I need something like a unique ID to actually connect to you in that messaging particular framework. Right, so there we were, and there we had all this nice little stuff. And then you said, well, what if we actually would invite a chatbot to the party? We're doing lots of things with chatbots, different types of chatbots. We're doing things with Oracle Digital System, we're doing things with Microsoft, we're doing things with Google, we're doing things with different types of chatbots to actually communicate through those chatbots with campus solutions and back to actually support students, to support teachers, etc. So, but what if we would actually link this particular chatbot to Connect? What could we do then? So if we do that, I've actually put some numbers in to make the amount of arrows a bit more logical to read here, so to say. So what if we would actually say that there is an approval happening in PeopleSoft Campus Solutions that is triggered off, and we're sending that message request object to Connect, and then through Connect, we're sending it to the target application. Great. That was step number one. That was easy. Now, what if the user then in the target application would like to approve? Because as you saw, I still had to click the link to go back into PeopleSoft to authorize myself, even though I know who you are, because actually I've sent you a unique message on your operator ID in Teams, or your operator ID in Slack. So I can, let's say, I'm not a security guy, but let's say with a large amount of secureness, I can actually say that this is you and that you're that particular user. Now, wouldn't it be ideal if you could actually communicate from the app that you're okay with this particular approval, for instance, or that you would like more information, and that you can then actually type a message back to the person to actually ask for that. Now, all those kinds of human interactions, and the more human they become, the more you need a type of translation between natural language and something that a computer understands again, we can then utilize the chatbot in between to actually say, okay, you know what, we're just going to communicate back from the target application to Connect. Connect is going to connect to the chatbot in between. The chatbot is going to connect back to Connect. And from there, we're actually then referring in a systematic manner back to the source application. So in this way, we can actually have the chatbot intervene and actually help out in more complex transactions. Now, this is a respond type of exercise, right? But what if we actually would do it the other way around then as well? So how about we actually have a student, a professor, an administrator actually asking for something from the Teams app that he's on, or the Apple app, or the Slack app, or the Google app, to do something in an application for him. That wouldn't be too hard. He would actually just say, hey, listen, can you get me my list of students? And as long as, hey, listen, get me the list of students is a command which is understood by the chatbot in some sense, the chatbot can then actually start to communicate back and forth to you in the app in case it doesn't understand what you mean precisely, or if it understands completely what you want, it can actually send that message onwards to Connect. Connect can connect to the target application. The target application can respond to the request that's come in, and that will actually then refer back to you in the app. So utilizing the chatbot as part of this particular framework actually makes it far more powerful even than it was before, because now it's no longer just a one-way notification model. It becomes a two-way interactive model whereby people don't have to leave where they are, and they can communicate in a safe and secure manner to other systems, even without leaving their Teams or leaving without their Slack or leaving their Google. So they can actually act in the application that they're using at the time. And of course, I completely and fully understand that in some cases you want to go into campus solutions. There's nothing wrong. We are in campus solutions most of the day, I would say. But in general, it actually gives me all kinds of options for people who are not so actually linked to campus solutions all day to say, you know what, you don't have to go into this system. You can just actually utilize whatever you need to do from wherever you are at that time. Right? So if you're looking at what we're doing right now, we're actually integrating these chatbots into our framework as we speak, and we're actually looking at extending the different possible connections that we're doing. We're also creating more configuration options for users. We're actually looking at the usability of the apps. This idea has been born a number of months ago. We're running with it a while now. We hope to actually release it as a general release in a couple of months. We'll be sure to actually release a free tier solution with the solution so that you can at least try it out for size and see if it works. And if you have a really low number of messaging that you do, you can actually utilize it. I could say almost like like Slack does for millions, I guess, of channels in the world. You can just actually use it as a free tier solution. But we do hope that you actually see the benefit of it as well. We are currently in testing this with particular universities. We're absolutely looking out, if possible, for people that actually are interested in this model and would like to try it out. If you're wanting to try it out, it's free to try it out. We would like to actually see what you see as use cases for this particular Connect Hub and how you could see it actually benefit. You can contact me on my email address. You can ping me in Slack on PSAdmin. I'm on PeopleSoft Innovation Summit. I'm on Campus Solutions Communities Slack channel as well. So if you want to participate in what we're doing, either from a university point of view, or maybe just because you're interested in the subject and you want to actually discuss and see what we're doing and actually see if you can also actually be part of that, feel free to contact me, because I do believe that we're actually onto something here. We believe that the possibilities in this way are endless, because once you have this hub in the middle, you can actually paint more and more and more applications on both sides and actually start to communicate. And if you, as said, integrate a particular bot of choice, it doesn't have to be Oracle Digital Assistant. It can also just be the Google one or the Microsoft one or the Amazon one or whatever you want. You can actually introduce natural language. You could introduce speech. And you can actually communicate and interact with your main systems in a far more, let's say, user-friendly manner, but also more modern manner than we actually are doing right now. So with that said, I would like to open the floor to questions if there are any, Joseph.
Yeah, just a reminder, everyone, if you have any questions, go ahead and put those in the question panel on the right side of your screen. Ernst, the first one I'm seeing here, can CY2 Connect or Campus Solutions use Twilio to send text messages?
Yes, so actually we are, meaning we are using Twilio to connect to WhatsApp, simply because it's actually the easiest way of doing it. But that's specifically for WhatsApp in this particular case. But it's true, we are using also WhatsApp to do that, simply because it's one of the few possibilities that we have at least found to properly connect to WhatsApp. So we're utilizing the bots to actually talk to Twilio, to then actually speak to WhatsApp, and we're utilizing Connect as well to utilize. We're using Connect and then Twilio to connect to WhatsApp in specific. Yes, absolutely.
A few people have talked about how they don't use Slack, but they use Teams. I'm just wondering if the functionality is any different between those two.
No, it is not actually. I mean, honestly, guys, the only reason I'm using Slack is because that's on my computer and I use it all day. And actually, as you could see, there was actually 1,500 things happening there all every 5 minutes. So that was why it for me is actually the easiest way of connecting it. But let's say on a technology level, it's slightly different. The API for Teams actually requires this slightly different authorization model. We actually connect to Slack both on a channel level as well as an individual user level. You can do exactly the same at Teams. You can also send information. Let's say all the error messages for us are not actually sent to a particular person, but they're sent to a channel where most of the people in CY2 are actually connected to. So we have the same kind of capabilities in Teams as well. You can actually create channels in your team to actually get messages about, for instance, problems or process schedulers dying or whatever it may be in a channel that most people see. And you can also communicate straight to a particular person in Teams. The only comment to make is that the actual initial connection is slightly different because of the fact that the API to connect to Teams, especially when you're talking about user level, is slightly different. But the capabilities on the Connect side are actually the same for us, yes.
Awesome. Last one that I'm seeing here. What do you see in higher ed being the most successful form of communication? Pretty deep one.
Yeah, well, I think that it's moving, isn't it? That's the thing. It's actually interesting to see that it's moving constantly. We've done quite some research in the context of us doing the chatbots to see where people are actually and what people are actually utilizing. And generation by generation, people are more at least speech and text focused. And they want to interact. So I'm going to say that in the end, I think that the bots will win, simply said. I think that the bots will win, and I believe that the bots will actually at some point take over some of these standalone functions, apps, or even like WhatsApp and so on, simply because the bots are actually able to manage more things for you from one particular point. But I think at the moment, at least, especially again, you're wherever you are in the world, you're actually facing Corona. I'm sure with just as where we are in Western Europe, but wherever you are as well. So at the moment, and this is of course one of the reasons we've pushed through with this particular exercise as well, is at the moment everybody I speak to is online all day, because that's the only way that they can actually either learn, or that they can work, or that they can communicate, and that they can actually collaborate. So, and then with that particular constantly being online, so to say, we also combine that with the fact, as said, that Teams went from 37 million users to 150 million users in probably 9 months or so. That's because all these universities are switching on Teams for everything that they do. After they switched on Zoom first, they're now switching on Teams to get the collaboration between students going and so on. So I'm going to say that for the moment, apps like Teams and so on are going to be where your students are. And as you know, I mean, Teams is free in the sense of once you have Teams, it's free to communicate to it, so to say. WhatsApp is great, it's because it's on your phone, but then Teams and others are also on your phone. So yeah, I'm a big Slack fan, and I'm big, I think we're going to lose the battle, of course, but that doesn't matter. I hope we can still use it for a long time. But yeah, I mean, Teams and other kind of like applications will give you at least the capability to communicate back and forth within one app, to also collaborate with your colleagues or with your fellow students in exactly the same app, and be very connected, so to say. So that would be the one for me, at least. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Ernst. Do you have any final words of wisdom before I wrap up?
Thanks for listening. I would say I do hope you enjoyed the ideas. I do hope you also can take some of the ideas away. Please don't forget about the adapters that we're using to actually communicate, to connect, for instance. Those adapters are unbelievably simple to actually start to connect. And if you have particular communications or particular events that you would like to push out to other systems, there was a question about it in the earlier presentation today. If you use the adapters, you can actually push out any kind of message to any kind of system afterwards. And you're just listening into the real event coming by. So perhaps in some of the cases, not utilizing the actual push notification framework to send something to another system, but just utilizing an integration broker message that you send may actually be easier to manage, and also will get you what you need, mainly actually communication between systems based on an event actually happening. So I would say, love to hear from you if you're interested in connecting on Connect. And thank you for being here, and thanks guys for offering us the opportunity to be in this fantastic conference.
Thank you, Ernst, for your session. I'd like to encourage everyone to learn more about CY2 by going to their website. That's cy2.nl. Lastly, I'd like to mention the PeopleSoft Innovation Summit. The next summit is being planned. We'll be sending out a survey on Friday, and we greatly appreciate your feedback on this week's event. I'd also encourage you to follow Appsian on LinkedIn and Twitter so you can be the first to learn about future events. We'd highly encourage you to join the official PeopleSoft Summit Slack channel. Ernst mentioned it here a few minutes ago that he's also in that channel. So if you have any further questions, you can reach out to him there. And you can find that link in the chat of this session. Our next session is driving business transformation through a move and improve to the cloud, and that's hosted by our friends over at Oracle. Stick around and we'll be right back in about 20 minutes. Thank you.